The auditorium was buzzing with energy. Executives, investors, and journalists were present not only to listen to Victor Azevedo, but to witness another show provided by the charismatic CEO. Victor was not just a businessman. He was a living legend. His company, Azevedo Tech, dominated the technology market with innovations that redefined the way people lived and worked. To many, he was a visionary, but to others, a fearless provocateur. Victor loved being in the spotlight. He knew how to manipulate a room full of people, how to catch every gaze and control every breath. He took the stage with firm steps, as if success were his by divine right, an irony that he himself would repudiate. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, adjusting the microphone with calculated calm. "We are here to talk about the future. And let me be clear, the future belongs to those who dare to dream and, more importantly, to act." The words flowed like music, each sentence carefully constructed to inspire, but also to provoke. He knew exactly how to capture the attention of his audience, and the stares fixed on the chairs in front of him proved it. Victor stood out not only for his intellect, but for his ability to defy norms. He loved to question, especially anything he considered superstition or unfounded belief. For him, faith was a crutch used by the weak. His almost cruel pragmatism was part of what made him so influential and so polarizing. Today, we are launching a technology that will transform the way businesses operate. Victor looked around, allowing the anticipation to build up. Advanced artificial intelligence, algorithms that learn with human precision. All of this is the result of what we value most: science, reason, and the power of the human mind. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause, but that was not what captured the public's attention that afternoon. It was the moment when Victor, true to his reputation, decided to add his personal brand to the speech. During the Q&A session, journalists took the opportunity to explore not only the technical aspects of the new technology, but also the philosophy behind it. It was then that a young reporter raised his hand. "Mr. Azevedo, your vision of the future is clear, but do you believe that technological progress and spirituality can coexist? There are those who say that great advances are often inspired by something greater, something divine." The question hung in the air for a moment. Victor leaned forward slightly, like a predator about to attack. "Spirituality and technology coexist." He paused dramatically, letting out a small smile. "I respect everyone's beliefs, but if there's one thing this company has proven, it's that we don't need miracles. We need solutions." The room was silent, but Victor knew that everyone was on the edge of their seats. He continued, "God, if he exists, must be busy somewhere else, because here we make our own destiny. Waiting for something divine is a distraction. We, human beings, are the only ones responsible for shaping the world in which we live." The response generated a mix of reactions. Some laughed nervously while others exchanged uncertain glances, but Victor, as always, was in control. He knew that these statements would make headlines the next day. Teasing was part of his strategy to stay relevant. "Let's focus on what we can measure and build," he concluded. "That, my friends, is what really matters." The auditorium applauded again, but this time there was a different energy in the air. Victor came down from the stage with his usual confident smile, but something changed that afternoon. He didn't realize it, but the words he uttered would reverberate in a way he couldn't have predicted. After leaving the event, Victor was driven home in his luxury car. The view of the city passed like a blur of lights, but Victor barely noticed. He was mentally reviewing the success of the presentation. The press conference had gone exactly as he had planned, and he could already imagine the headlines extolling yet another breakthrough by Azevedo Tech. Upon arriving at his penthouse apartment, Victor was greeted by the comfortable silence of his luxuriously minimalist home. He appreciated order, control. In his mind, life was like his business. Everything had to be in its proper place. But that night, the silence seemed heavier. He tried to shake off the feeling, immersing himself in reports and emails, but he couldn't concentrate. He got up and went to the balcony, where the city lights shone below. While watching the horizon, something unexpected happened. A subtle, almost imperceptible sound cut through the silence. It wasn't the noise of the city or the wind. Era, a whisper. Victor frowned, trying to identify where he came from, but found nothing. The sound disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Victor shook his head, laughing at himself. "You're imagining things, Azevedo." He went back inside, but the feeling followed him. There was something unsettling that night, something he couldn't explain. The next morning, Victor resumed his routine. Meetings, important decisions, and interviews took their day. He was on top of the world, or so he believed. But as the week progressed, the whispers returned. Always at night, always when he was alone. They were subtle at first, almost as if the wind was playing with their ears. But they began to become clearer. Words that he couldn't understand, but that awakened something inside him, an uncomfortable feeling that he was being watched. Called. One night, while he was in his bed, he heard it again. This time, the voice sounded closer, clearer. "Victor." He sat up abruptly, looking around the dark room. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice firm, but full of irritation. There was no response. Just the sound of your heart beating in the silence. Victor spent the next few days trying to ignore what he considered hallucinations. He believed in the power of logic and control, but these events were beginning to test his conviction. It was on one of these nights that the voice finally spoke more clearly. "It's time, Victor." Victor felt a shiver run down his spine. As much as he wanted to reject what was happening, something inside him knew that his life was about to change irrevocably. Victor did not believe in coincidences. For him, everything in life was the result of planning and execution. However, the last few days had shaken this certainty. The whispers he heard at night were not normal. Something was out of his control, and this idea disturbed him deeply. He tried to ignore, to rationalize, but the whispers continued. They became clearer, more persistent, until finally Victor decided he needed to do something about it. He wasn't the kind of man who stood around waiting for answers. If there were a logical explanation, he would find it. The next morning, Victor scheduled an appointment with his trusted doctor. During the conversation, he recounted the strange events of the last few nights, although he hesitated to mention the part about the whispers. "I've been having trouble sleeping," he said, trying to sound casual. "I think it could be stress." The doctor, an experienced and discreet man, asked some usual questions, but did not seem worried. "Victor, you're under constant pressure. It is not uncommon for the mind to react in this way. I'm going to prescribe something light to help with sleep." Victor left the office with the prescription in hand, but he was not satisfied. He knew that this would not solve the problem. Those whispers were not just the result of tiredness. They were something more. That night, even with the pills, the whispers returned. This time, they were sharper than ever. "Victor, you can't keep running away." He opened his eyes immediately, feeling his heart race. The room was dark, but he felt the presence of something or someone. "Who are you? What do you want?" he asked, his voice echoing in the stillness. Silence took over again, but Victor knew that this would not be the last time he would hear the voice. The following days were a constant test of his sanity. During the meetings at the company, Victor maintained his confident posture, but inside, he was restless. The nights were the worst, with the whispers intensifying and the messages becoming more direct. "It's time to face the truth." Those words haunted him. What was this truth that he needed to face? Victor began to question things that once seemed unshakable. The control he had always exercised over his life seemed to slip through his fingers. One night, tired of fighting the unknown, Victor decided he needed a break. He got into his car and drove aimlessly, trying to clear his mind. The streets were quiet, and the normally vibrant city seemed shrouded in an almost otherworldly stillness. Eventually, he stopped in front of an old church. It was an imposing but simple building, with stained glass windows that reflected the light from the streetlights. Victor was not religious. He avoided places like that, believing they had nothing to offer. But something made him get out of the car and get closer. Upon entering, he was greeted by a welcoming silence. The air smelled of incense, and the candles cast dancing shadows across the walls. He walked to one of the benches and sat down, not knowing exactly why he was there. It was then that he heard it again, but this time the voice did not come from outside. It resonated within him, like a thought that wasn't his own. "You need to open your eyes." Victor took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. He knew something was happening, something that challenged everything he believed in. For the first time, he considered the possibility that there was more to life than he could see or understand. As he sat there, an elderly man approached him and sat down beside him. He wore simple clothes and had a gentle but penetrating gaze. "You seem restless, my son," the man said in a soft voice. Victor, surprised, turned to him, but hesitated before answering. "Just looking for answers, I guess." The man smiled. "Sometimes the answers don't come from the outside. They are already inside us, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves." Victor frowned. It wasn't the kind of conversation he expected to have, but something in the man's words made him feel less alone. "What if I don't want those answers?" Victor asked, his voice full of frustration. "What if I prefer to continue as I am?" The man kept his gaze fixed on Victor. "The answers come when we are ready, even if we think we are not." With that, the man got up and slowly walked out of the church, leaving Victor alone with his thoughts. He stood there for a few more minutes, trying to process what had happened, before deciding to return home. That night, back at his apartment, Victor sat on the porch, gazing at the lights of the city. The man's words echoed in her mind, mingling with the whispers that now seemed more familiar, almost comforting. "It's time, Victor." This time, he did not resist. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to listen. The voice continued, guiding him through memories, regrets, and choices he had made. It was as if a mirror was placed before him, forcing him to face parts of himself that he had always avoided. Victor realized that he could no longer run away. Something inside him was changing, and he knew he needed to figure out what it was. Victor spent the next few days immersed in an introspection he had never experienced before. For the first time in years, it slowed down. The constant search for results and control gave way to moments of silence and reflection. He tried to understand the meaning of the messages he had been receiving, but the answers still eluded him. During the day, Victor behaved as usual. He made important decisions, led meetings, and projected his usual unwavering confidence. However, in the lonely hours of the night, when the noise of the city dissipated, he was confronted with growing restlessness. On one of those nights, as he sat in his armchair, the voice returned, but this time it seemed more urgent, more demanding. "Look at yourself, Victor. What do you see?" He closed his eyes, trying to ignore it, but the voice insisted, echoing in his mind. Reluctantly, Victor stood up and walked to the large mirror in his room. He looked at his own reflection, but he didn't see the powerful, confident man he had always believed himself to be. Instead, he saw a weary countenance, eyes scarred by exhaustion, and something deeper loneliness. The voice returned, now soft but firm. You built an empire, but you lost yourself in the process. It's time to face your truths. Victor looked away, feeling a pain that was not physical, but emotional. He realized that, no matter how hard he tried to run away, something inside him was crying out for change. The next morning, Victor decided to revisit parts of his past that he had always avoided. He started with his old home, where he had grown up before achieving success. It was a modest building in a quiet neighborhood, very different from the luxury that now surrounded it. He parked the car and stayed there for a few minutes, observing the aged facade. Finally, he mustered up his courage and knocked on the door. An elderly woman opened it, and Victor immediately recognized it. It was Dona Elcia, a neighbor from his childhood. "Victor?" she asked, surprised. "I can't believe it's you." "Yes, Dona Lucia. It's me. I was in the city and thought about stopping by." She invited him in, and the two talked for hours. As they spoke, memories of his childhood surfaced. Victor remembered playing in the street with other children, the financial difficulties his family faced, and the moment he promised himself that he would be rich and powerful and never feel vulnerable again. "You've always been determined," said Dona Lucia with a nostalgic smile. "But you know, Victor, there was something about you as a child that I don't see now." "What?" he asked, intrigued. "Joy. At that time, even with all the difficulties, you had a light in your eyes." Her words resonated deeply. Victor realized that in his relentless pursuit of success, he had missed something essential. He left Dona Elcia's house with a weight on his chest, but also with a new determination. He needed to recover that light. In the following days, Victor began to reconnect with people from his past. He called old colleagues, met with friends he had left behind, and in each interaction, felt more human, more present. One of the most significant encounters was with Eduardo, a former partner with whom Victor had broken up years ago. The separation had been bitter, marked by misunderstandings and harsh words. Victor knew that this meeting would not be easy, but it was necessary. When they met in a discreet cafe, the atmosphere was tense. Eduardo maintained a reserved posture, clearly still hurt. "Why did you call me here, Victor?" Eduardo asked directly. Victor took a deep breath, recognizing the weight of the moment. "I came to apologize, Eduardo. I did things and said things that I can't justify. I thought I was right, but now I see how wrong I was." Eduardo stared at him for a long moment before answering. "You don't know how many times I expected to hear that, Victor." The conversation continued, and little by little, the ice between the two began to melt. At the end of the meeting, both said goodbye with a firm handshake and a mutual commitment to leave the past behind. Reflections on solitude at home, Victor began to record his experiences in a notebook. It wasn't something planned, but the words flowed as a way to lighten the weight he carried. He wrote about his mistakes, his achievements, and most importantly, what he was learning in this new phase of his life. It was during one of these writing sessions that the voice returned, but this time with a different message. "You're starting to see. But there is still more to be done." Victor knew that the journey was far from over. Each step took him deeper into his own soul, revealing truths he never had the courage to face. A few days later, Victor received an email from an old mentor, someone he deeply admired, but had lost touch with over the years. The email was short but loaded with meaning. "Victor, I heard about your move. I'm organizing a meeting with some leaders to discuss purpose and legacy. I think you should be there." Victor read the message several times, feeling that this invitation was more than just a meeting. It was a call to something greater. He answered in the affirmative and began to prepare for the meeting. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was on the right path, guided not only by his ambition, but by a deeper purpose. The meeting with former leaders was scheduled for a weekend at a retreat in the mountains, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Victor felt reluctant at first, but he knew he had to go. Something inside him said that this would be a pivotal moment in his journey. Upon arrival, he was greeted by Paul, his former mentor. Paulo was a man of calm, almost serene presence, and exuded a wisdom that Victor had always admired. "Victor, I'm glad you came," Paulo said, shaking his hand. "This place has the power to make us reflect on what really matters." Victor looked around. The retreat was simple but welcoming. There was a meditation room, an outdoor area overlooking the valley, and small individual rooms for the participants. He felt that this would be a safe space to face the truths he had been avoiding. In the first session, Paulo gathered all the participants in a circle. There were about 15 people, each with their own stories and backgrounds. The theme of the meeting was clear: purpose and reconciliation. "Today, let's start with something simple but powerful," Paul said with a reassuring smile. "I want each of you to share a choice that marked your life, something that shaped you, for better or for worse." Victor felt his heart race. He wasn't someone who used to open up easily, but he knew he couldn't run away this time. One by one, the participants shared stories of losses, victories, regrets, and overcoming. When it was Victor's turn, he took a deep breath and started. "I have always been guided by the need for control. Every decision I made, every step I took, was with the goal of making sure I was in charge. This brought me success, but it also isolated me. I did things I regret. I hurt important people. And for a long time, I thought I could just move on without looking back." The words flowed unexpectedly, and Victor felt a weight slowly being lightened. "But now, I'm beginning to understand that I can't go on like this. I need to face these choices, reconcile myself with the past to find peace." Paul nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "Thanks for sharing, Victor. The first step to healing is honesty with yourself." In the following days, Victor immersed himself in the activities of the retreat. There were meditation sessions, reflective writing exercises, and group conversations. Each activity seemed to bring a new layer of understanding about oneself and one's relationships. During a morning walk, Paulo approached Victor and suggested that they talk alone. "You carry a weight, Victor," Paul said, as they both gazed down the valley. "It's time to let go of what no longer serves you." Victor nodded, but didn't know where to start. "I've been thinking a lot about the people I left behind," he confessed. "Some of them I've already looked for, but I feel that there is still something deeper that I need to confront." Paul encouraged him to explore these emotions and suggested a powerful exercise. "Write a letter to yourself. Talk about your fears, your regrets, but also about the hopes you have for the future." Victor spent that night hunched over his notebook, writing like never before. Words flowed, revealing parts of his soul that he barely knew existed. He wrote about his childhood, his early dreams, and how along the way he let go of what really mattered in pursuit of power and control. On the penultimate day of the retreat, the participants were invited to carry out a symbolic activity. Each one had to burn something that represented a weight of the past. Victor chose the letter he had written the night before. As she placed the paper in the flames, she felt a mixture of relief and sadness. It was as if he was saying goodbye to an old version of himself, someone he no longer wanted to be. Paul's words echoed in his mind. "Fire destroys, but it also purifies." After the ceremony, Victor felt lighter, but there was something that still bothered him. During dinner, he approached Paul again. "I feel like something is still missing," he said. "Something I can't define." Paul smiled, as if he expected it. Sometimes what we lack is not in something we can see or touch. It's in the acceptance that we don't need all the answers right now. On the last night of the retreat, participants gathered around a campfire. The atmosphere was one of camaraderie and gratitude. As the flames danced under the starry sky, Victor felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The voice returned, but this time it didn't come as an urgent call. It was a gentle whisper, almost like a friend by his side. "You're on the right track, Victor. Keep trusting." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time, he did not try to resist or question. He just accepted. Victor left the retreat with a new perspective. He knew the journey was far from over, but now he had the tools and courage to keep going. Each step was an invitation to reconnect with parts of himself that he had lost. Back in the city, Victor began to implement changes in his life. He delegated more responsibilities to the company, allowing himself more time to cultivate his relationships and deepen his introspection. One day, while reviewing the week's commitments, Victor noticed an email from Eduardo, the old partner with whom he had recently reconciled. Eduardo invited him to a collaborative project, something that seemed challenging, but also aligned with the new purpose that Victor had been discovering. Victor smiled, feeling ready for whatever came. He knew that, regardless of the challenges, he was finally in tune with something bigger than himself. The days following the retreat brought a new routine for Victor. The once control-obsessed CEO now prioritized moments of pause and reflection. Mornings started early, but no longer with exhausting meetings. Instead, Victor spent time in silence, either writing in his notebook or contemplating the view from his balcony. The invitation from Eduardo, his former partner, remained in his mind. A collaborative project would be an opportunity to reaffirm the reconciliation between them, but also a challenge in their new approach to business. For years, Victor had believed that only he knew how to lead. Now, he needed to learn how to work in true partnership. After reflecting for a few days, Victor decided to accept the invitation. He scheduled a meeting with Eduardo to discuss the details. The meeting took place in a small cafe in the center of the city, away from the formal environment of the meeting rooms. Eduardo arrived on time, with a smile on his face and a folder full of notes. "I'm glad you accepted, Victor," he said, shaking hands with his former partner. "I think we have a great opportunity here." Eduardo explained that the project involved the development of a technological platform focused on accessibility, something that could positively impact thousands of people with disabilities. It was an idea that combined innovation with purpose, something Victor had never considered in his previous endeavors. "We want to use technology to improve lives, not just to maximize profits," said Eduardo. "And I know that, together, we can do something incredible." Victor listened attentively, feeling inspired. He recognized Eduardo's passion and realized that, for the first time, he was truly aligned with the project not only for the financial potential, but for the impact it could have. "I'm in, Eduardo," Victor replied with a genuine smile. "Let's do it together." Despite his new perspective, Victor soon realized that the transition to a more collaborative leadership style would be more difficult than he imagined. During the first few weeks of working on the project, he fought his impulses to take full control. Old habits, such as obsessively reviewing every detail and making unilateral decisions, began to emerge again. In one of the meetings, Eduardo noticed the growing tension. "Victor, I know you're used to doing everything your way, but we need to trust each other," Eduardo said, calmly but firmly. "This project is about partnership. We cannot build something meaningful if we are not willing to compromise." Victor reflected on these words. He knew Eduardo was right, but it was hard to completely relinquish control. That evening, while writing in his notebook, Victor wrote down a phrase he had heard during the retreat. "Trust is the basis of all true connection." He decided that he needed to apply this, not only in his personal relationships, but also in his work. As time went on, Victor began to delegate more responsibilities and trust the abilities of Eduardo and the team they had assembled together. He realized that, by giving space to other voices, the project became richer and more innovative. One of the initiatives that impacted him the most was a series of workshops organized by the team, where people with disabilities were invited to share their experiences and needs. Victor participated in each session, listening carefully to the stories and challenges that these people faced on a daily basis. In one of these workshops, a young woman named Sophia shared how limited technology made her academic life difficult. She spoke with a sincerity and strength that touched Victor deeply. "What we need is not just advanced technology," Sophia said. "We need technology that understands our realities and empowers us." Those words stayed with Victor. He realized that his view of the purpose of technology was transforming. It wasn't just about creating innovative solutions, but about creating with empathy and understanding. At the same time as working on the project with Eduardo, Victor continued to rebuild his personal TIs. He grew even closer to Clara and Daniel, his children, taking the time to listen to them and participate in their lives in a more meaningful way. Clara, in particular, was thrilled with the changes in her father. During a family dinner, she commented, "Dad, it's amazing to see how different you are. I hardly recognize the man who used to be always busy, always distant." Daniel nodded, adding, "Yes, Dad. I think we're finally starting to really get to know each other." Victor felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't experienced in years. He realized that the journey of reconciliation was not just about forgiving and being forgiven, but also about being present and open to the people he loved. One evening, after a long day of work and a family dinner, Victor sat on his balcony to contemplate the city. The familiar whisper returned, but this time he felt no unease. It was like an old friend bringing a message of encouragement. "You are fulfilling your purpose, Victor. But remember, this is just the beginning." He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time, he felt completely at peace with who he was becoming. He knew the journey would still continue, but now every step was guided by something bigger than himself. The next morning, Victor received a call from Eduardo. The tone in his partner's voice was one of enthusiasm. "Victor, I have good news. The project is almost ready for launch, and the first tests were a success. We're about to do something big." Victor smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude and accomplishment. He knew he couldn't have gotten there alone. It was the sum of all the connections of each reconciliation and learning that led him to that moment. Victor felt that something great was about to happen. The project with Eduardo had advanced faster than he could have imagined, and the official launch was just days away. The platform they had developed promised to revolutionize the way people with disabilities interacted with technology. Victor was excited, but deep down, there was a sense that this moment would mark more than just a professional milestone. It was as if his entire journey was preparing him for something greater. On the morning of the launch, Victor woke up early. The sky was clear, and a light breeze came in through his bedroom window. He sat in silence for a few minutes, feeling the familiar presence of the voice that had guided him for the past few months. This time, the whisper did not come as an order or a call. It was more of a confirmation. "Today, you will understand." Victor didn't know exactly what that meant, but he felt a mixture of calm and expectation. He got ready and headed to the venue, where journalists, investors, and community members were eagerly awaiting the big announcement. The auditorium was packed, with palpable energy in the air. Eduardo opened the event with an emotional speech, highlighting the impact that the new platform would have on the lives of thousands of people. He then invited Victor to the stage to share a few words. Victor took a deep breath before going up. As he faced the audience, he felt a surge of emotions: pride in what they had achieved, gratitude for the connections he had rebuilt, and a deep sense of purpose. "Today, We're not just launching a new technology, he began, his voice firm and clear. We are starting a movement. A move to ensure that no one is left behind. The audience applauded warmly, but Victor did not finish. He paused, reflecting for a moment before continuing. For much of my life, I believed that success was measured by control, by the amount of achievements accumulated. But I learned, in a way I never imagined, that true success is in the lives we touch and the connections we build. He looked at Eduardo, then at the people with disabilities who had contributed to the project, and felt a lump in his throat. This project is not just about technology. It's about empathy, about listening and understanding. And it is thanks to all of you that we are here today, ready to make a difference. The room erupted in applause. Victor came down from the stage, feeling a lightness he had never experienced before. He knew that this moment was not just a professional milestone, but a reflection of his personal transformation. After the event, Victor went home, still absorbing everything that had happened. Sitting on his porch, he felt the presence of the voice again. This time, however, she did not whisper. It was as if he was waiting for something. Suddenly, Victor was seized by an intense memory. He saw himself as a child, sitting next to his mother, who held his hand as they prayed together. He had completely forgotten that moment, but now he felt it with stunning clarity. "I've always believed in you, Victor," his mother said with a warm smile. "One day, you'll do something that will change the world." Victor felt the tears run down his face. He had always thought that his mother talked about material success, but now he understood that it was something much bigger. It was about finding a purpose that transcended your personal ambitions. The voice finally spoke again, this time with almost tangible clarity. "You found what you've always been looking for, Victor. The journey has brought him here, but it doesn't end here. Now you must lead others along the way." Victor understood what he needed to do. Their mission was not just to create technological solutions or achieve financial success. It was to use their experience, their lessons, and their connections to inspire others to seek their purpose and reconciliation in their own lives. The next day, Victor gathered his team and shared his vision. He proposed that, in addition to technological work, the company invest in mentoring programs and community initiatives. Eduardo, moved, immediately supported the idea. "That's exactly what we need, Victor. That's the next step." Together, they created a program called Connected Pathways, which would offer support to emerging entrepreneurs, particularly those coming from marginalized communities. Victor has become an active mentor, sharing his personal journey and helping others navigate their own challenges. In one of the first sessions of the program, a young man named Raphael shared his story. He came from a difficult environment and struggled to find his way, but Victor's words inspired him to keep going. "Your lessons on purpose and reconciliation have given me strength, Mr. Victor. I want to make a difference, just like you." Victor smiled, feeling a deep connection with Raphael. He knew that his role now was to help people like him find their own way. As time went by, Victor's impact spread. His story of transformation began to be told at conferences and events around the world, inspiring leaders and communities. He continued to feel the presence of the voice, but now as a constant companion, a silent guide who encouraged him to move forward. One evening, while reviewing some notes for an upcoming discussion, Clara and Daniel visited him. They sat together on the porch, laughing and remembering moments from their childhood. Victor felt a deep gratitude for all that he had experienced and for every lesson he had learned. "Dad, you really changed our lives," Clara said, her eyes full of pride. "And not just ours. You are changing the world." Victor looked at his children, feeling a peace he had never experienced before. "There is still much to do," he replied with a smile. "But I'm ready for every step." Victor's journey, which had begun with doubt, and disdain, had led him to a place of purpose and deep connection. He knew that regardless of the challenges ahead, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The following months were of intense activity for Victor. With the success of the Accessibility Project and the launch of the Connected Paths program, he has seen his influence grow in unexpected ways. The former CEO, known for his pragmatism and skepticism, was now seen as a humanitarian leader, a mentor who inspired by example. Victor, however, knew that his transformation was not the end of his journey, but the beginning of a new chapter. The voice, which had always accompanied him, became a quieter but still constant presence, as a subtle reminder that there was much to be done. One morning, while reviewing a financial report, Victor received a call. It was from a global humanitarian organization, Bridge to the Future, which worked to connect vulnerable communities to educational and technological opportunities. They had followed his trajectory and were impressed by the impact of his projects. "Mr. Azevedo, we would like to invite you to participate in a special mission," said the voice on the other end of the line. "We are developing a project in an isolated community in the countryside, and we believe that his experience and leadership would be invaluable." Victor was silent for a moment, absorbing the invitation. He had dedicated much of his recent life to helping people through technology, but this was an opportunity to get directly involved, to be in the field, and see the impact of his work up close. "I'm honored by the invitation," he replied finally. "I want to know more about the project." 2 weeks later, Victor embarked on a trip to the interior of the country. The destination was a small village called New Hope, where the organization was implementing a technology education program for young people. The drive was long, passing through dirt roads and secluded landscapes, but Victor felt a growing excitement. He knew that this experience would take him to a new level of understanding and connection. Upon arrival, he was warmly welcomed by the residents and the Bridge to the Future team. There was a mixture of curiosity and respect in people's eyes. To many, he was an almost mythical figure, someone who had managed to reach the top of the corporate world and still found time to help others. Over the next few days, Victor immersed himself in the life of the community. He visited schools, talked to teachers and parents, and spent hours listening to the stories of young people. Each conversation reinforced his conviction that true change began with education and opportunity. One of these stories marked him deeply. It was that of Marcos, a 17-year-old who dreamed of becoming an engineer, but who faced enormous difficulties due to lack of resources. "Mr. Victor, I've always dreamed of building things that can improve people's lives," Marcos said, with a twinkle in his eye. "But here, the chances are slim. Sometimes I think my dreams are too big for this place." Victor put his hand on Mark's shoulder and replied firmly, "Never let circumstances define the size of your dreams, Mark. We're here to make sure you have the tools to achieve everything you want." Victor not only led the initiatives, he participated actively. He spent afternoons helping to install computers and conducting workshops to teach basic programming skills. He knew that it was not enough to bring technology. It was necessary to teach how to use it in a meaningful way. During one of these sessions, he noticed something remarkable. While helping a group of young people solve logic problems, he saw in them the same passion and determination that he himself had had in his youth. But there was one crucial difference. These young people had an entire community on their side, offering support and encouragement. At the end of his 3rd week in the village, the community organized a ceremony in appreciation of the work of Pont Para ao Futuro and Victor. It was a simple event, but full of emotion. Children and youth performed dances and songs, and teachers expressed their gratitude in heartfelt speeches. When he was invited to speak, Victor climbed onto the small makeshift stage and looked out over the crowd before him. Each face reflected hope, and he felt a wave of gratitude to be there. "This is not just a project about technology or education," he began. It's about believing in each other. Today, I see the future in these young people, and I know that together, we are building something that goes far beyond us." The audience erupted in applause. Victor came down from the stage and, as the festivities continued, he felt the presence of the voice again. It was as if she was confirming what he already knew. That moment was another step in his journey of purpose. Before leaving Nova Esperana, Victor worked with the team to establish a sustainable framework for the program. He wanted to ensure that even after his departure, the community would continue to thrive. "We're just getting started," he told Marcos during his farewell. "Trust the process and never stop dreaming." Mark nodded, his eyes full of determination. Back in town, Victor felt that he had changed again. The experience in New Hope had not only reinforced his purpose, but it had also connected him even more deeply with the importance of serving others. He gathered his team and shared what he had learned, proposing new initiatives that combined technology with direct social impact. "What we saw in Nova Esperana is just the beginning," he said. "We can do more, reach more people, and create a lasting legacy." The team, inspired by Victor's passion, enthusiastically embarked on the new phase of projects. That night, as he reviewed plans for the next steps, Victor heard the familiar whisper again. This time, however, there was something different. It was more of a reminder than an instruction, like a friend reassuring his confidence. "You've found your way, Victor. Now, light the way for others." He closed his eyes and smiled. The journey continued, and he was more than ready to move on. Victor felt that his life had reached a new balance. The man who had once prided himself on his self-reliance now found purpose in serving others. But as he well knew, the journey never ended. Each achievement brought new challenges, and he was more than willing to take them on. After the success of the project in Nova Esperana, Victor was inundated with invitations to speak at conferences, participate in panels, and lead new social impact projects. While he felt honored, he also knew he needed to be judicious. His priority now was to ensure that every action had a lasting impact. One of these opportunities led him to a major international summit on social innovation. Held in Geneva, the event would bring together global leaders, entrepreneurs, and changemakers to discuss how technology could be used to solve complex societal problems. Victor accepted the invitation, recognizing that this was a chance to further expand his reach. Upon arriving at the summit, Victor was received as an inspirational figure. Many already knew his story of transformation and were eager to hear his ideas. During the days of the event, he participated in several sessions and met people from different parts of the world, all united by a common desire to make a difference. Among the various conversations, one stood out. It was with Amira, a young entrepreneur from the Middle East, who had founded an organization dedicated to teaching programming to women in conflict areas. "Victor, your story inspires me deeply," she said. "I'm struggling to expand our program, but we face so many barriers. Financial, cultural, even security." Victor listened attentively. He saw in Amira the same passion he had found in young people like Marcos, but he also noticed the unique challenges she faced. "Amira, maybe we can collaborate," he suggested. "I have resources and a network that can help. If we work together, we can take your project to a new level." Amira's eyes lit up with hope. "That would be amazing, Victor. Thank you for believing in us." Back in his country, Victor and his team began working on Amira's project. They helped develop a secure platform that would allow women to participate in classes remotely, protecting them from the risks of their regions. The partnership was a success, and in a few months, hundreds of women were trained. During a follow-up meeting, Amira shared a story that moved everyone. "One of our students, Aisha, used the skills she learned to create a tool that helps local communities track medical supplies. It is saving lives And this was only possible because of our collaboration. Victor felt a deep gratitude. He knew that the impact of his actions now spread to places he never imagined reaching. In the midst of all this work, Victor continued to devote time to introspection. He knew that in order to lead with purpose, he needed to maintain his connection to what really mattered. On a quiet evening, while standing on his porch, he reflected on all that he had learned. The voice which had guided him for so long seemed more distant, but Victor knew that this did not mean absence. It was as if he was finally walking on his own, with the confidence of someone who had found his purpose. You are leaving a legacy, Victor. But remember, the most lasting impact is the one that transforms hearts. Those words stayed with him. He knew that it was not enough to create solutions. It was necessary to inspire others to do the same. Victor decided to dedicate more time to the Caminhas Conectado program, now referenced in mentoring for young leaders. He saw each session as an opportunity to plant seeds that would germinate for generations. In one of these sessions, he met Anna, a 22-year-old who dreamed of creating a renewable energy startup. Anna had brilliant ideas, but her confidence was shaken by the lack of support. "Mr. Victor, sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming too big," she confessed in a shy voice. Victor smiled, remembering how he himself had already felt the weight of doubt. "Anna, big dreams are the only ones worth pursuing. And remember, you're never alone. We're here to support your journey." With the support of Victor and the program's community, Anna was able to launch her startup and began to make a difference in underserved communities by bringing clean and affordable energy. Each story like that of Anna or Amira reinforced in Victor the certainty that he was exactly where he should be. He felt that his legacy was not just the direct impact of his actions, but the inspiration he gave others to become agents of change. Over the months, Victor was invited to share his story in a documentary about transformative leaders. The filming took him back to significant places on his journey: his old company, the village of Nova Esperança, and even the church where he had heard the first whispers. During the recording, he shared a reflection. "I never imagined that my life would take this course. But I learned that purpose is not something we find. It is something we build, step by step, reconciliation by reconciliation, until we become the best of ourselves." At the premiere of the documentary, Victor was received with a standing ovation. The audience was thrilled with his journey of redemption and impact. After the event, many came forward to thank and share how their story had inspired changes in their own lives. As Victor listened to these stories, he realized that the voice that had guided him now lived on in the people he had touched. His legacy was not only his. It was a network of light that continued to expand. That night, as he walked alone under the starry sky, Victor looked up and felt a deep peace. "You have fulfilled your calling, Victor. And the world is better for that," he smiled, knowing that his journey, while transformative, was just one part of something much bigger. As time went on, Victor's influence continued to grow. Not only did it directly impact communities and individuals, but it had also become a symbol of transformation. Companies and organizations began to model their social initiatives based on the principles he promoted: empathy, collaboration, and purpose. Despite his always busy schedule, Victor made a point of balancing his responsibilities. He had learned that in order to continue serving others, he also needed to take care of himself and keep his personal connections strong. His moments with Clara and Daniel became more frequent and profound, and he found genuine joy in watching his children flourish on their own journeys. One afternoon, while walking through the park with Clara, she brought up an idea that had been maturing for some time. "Dad, have you ever thought about writing a book about everything you've experienced?" she asked with an encouraging smile. "Your story could reach even more people." Victor hesitated for a moment. He had never considered himself a writer, but he recognized the value of sharing his experiences more broadly. Maybe it's the right time, he replied thoughtfully. If it can help other people find their own paths, it's worth a try. Writing your own truth, Victor began the writing project with the same commitment he dedicated to everything in his life. He revisited his past with an honest eye, reflecting on every mistake, every victory, and, above all, every lesson learned. The process was intense, but also deeply healing. Over the course of months, he transformed his memories into chapters that told a journey from arrogance to redemption, from control to surrender, from isolation to connection. On each page, he strove to be authentic, not hiding his flaws, but using them as learning points. During this process, Victor had the constant support of Clara, who reviewed the drafts and offered honest feedback. "You look amazing, Dad," she said after reading one of the most emotional chapters, which detailed her encounter with the voice for the first time. "I think people will identify deeply with this." Victor knew that the book was not just about him. It was a message to all those who, at some point, felt lost or disconnected, showing that there is always a way back. When the book, titled Redemption in Silence, A Journey of Purpose, was finally published, the response was overwhelming. It quickly became a bestseller, touching readers around the world. People from different backgrounds sent messages to Victor, sharing how his story had inspired change in their own lives. One such reader was John, a young entrepreneur who was on the verge of losing everything due to selfish decisions and self-destructive behavior. After reading the book, he decided to seek out Victor, determined to change his trajectory. Victor agreed to meet him, and over a long coffee, listened attentively as Ju vented. At the end, Victor shared a few words of encouragement. "John, the fact that you are here today already shows your courage. The first step is always the most difficult, but it is also the most important. Change starts with a willingness to look inward and adjust what needs to be adjusted." Ju left that conversation with a new determination, and months later, he sent a letter to Victor, telling how he had transformed his life and his business. While traveling to promote the book, Victor had an encounter that would mark his life in an indelible way. In a small town in the countryside, he was invited to speak at a community event. After his talk, an elderly woman approached him, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Azevedo, your book brought me back something I thought I had lost forever," she said. "My son and I hadn't spoken in years, but after reading his story, he came to me. Today, we are reconciling." Victor felt a lump in his throat. That woman's story was a powerful testament to the scope of her journey. Each reconciliation inspired by his words was a burning flame, illuminating paths that once seemed dark. One night, after a long journey, Victor was back on his balcony, looking up at the starry sky. He reflected on all that he had achieved and the lives he had touched. The impact of his journey was greater than he had ever imagined, but he knew it wasn't about personal glory. The voice returned, serene and familiar. "You fulfilled your role, Victor. But its mission goes further. Continue to be the light that guides others on the path." Victor felt a deep peace. He knew that his journey was part of something bigger, something that transcended his own experiences. The real realization was not only in what he had achieved, but in the legacy he was leaving. With the success of the book and the continued growth of his social initiatives, Victor became a catalyst for change. It has inspired other companies to integrate social impact into their strategies and helped emerging leaders become agents of transformation. At a global conference, where he was honored for his contributions, Victor took the stage to share one last reflection. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that purpose is not something we find by chance. It is something that we choose every day, in every decision. The legacy we leave is not in monuments or trophies, but in the lives we touch and the connections we build." The audience gave him a standing ovation, but Victor knew that the true recognition was in the stories of transformation he had helped create. Victor left the conference with a sense of mission accomplished, but also with the certainty that his journey was far from over. Every step he took was an invitation to new opportunities to serve and inspire. That night, while Clara and Daniel accompanied him home, Victor looked at his children and felt deep gratitude. He knew that the legacy he was building was not only for the world, but also for them. There's still a lot to be done, he thought with a quiet smile. And I'm ready for every new challenge. Victor woke up that morning with a feeling of lightness that he hadn't experienced in years. The sun poured in softly through the windows, illuminating the room with a golden light. He stood up slowly, taking a deep breath, and felt a deep peace in his heart. His journey had transformed him, but he knew there was still more to do. The last few years had been intense. Victor had dedicated himself tirelessly to projects that impacted thousands of lives. But what touched him most were the individual stories of transformation. He saw in them the reflection of his own journey and knew that each connection was an essential part of something bigger. While reviewing his schedule, Victor received an unexpected invitation. It was from an old colleague from his time as CEO, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Carlos, a man who had always admired him, now led a large global organization focused on humanitarian causes. Victor, your work in recent years has been an inspiration, the message said. We are organizing a forum in our main center, and we would like you to be the keynote speaker. The theme is Transforming Lives, the Power of Reconciliation and Purpose. His story would be a perfect example to inspire the participants. Victor accepted the invitation with gratitude. He knew that this event would be an opportunity to share not only his journey, but also the lessons that could help others find their own paths. During the weeks leading up to the forum, Victor immersed himself in deep reflections. He revisited the milestones of his transformation, from the first mysterious whispers to the moments of reconciliation with old friends and family. Each experience had shaped him, teaching him the value of humility, empathy, and purpose. Clara and Daniel helped Victor organize his ideas. Sitting around the dinner table, they discussed how he could convey his message in a more impactful way. Dad, I think the most powerful point of your story is how you learned to listen, Clara said. Not only the voice, but the people around you. This is something that many need to learn. Victor nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his daughter's words. He knew that active listening had been one of the most transformative aspects of his journey. The big day has arrived. Victor traveled to the main center of Carlos's organization, an imposing installation in the midst of a serene landscape. The place was filled with people from all over the world, community leaders, social entrepreneurs, students, and professionals dedicated to humanitarian causes. When it was his turn to speak, Victor took the stage to warm applause. He looked at the audience and felt an immediate connection with each person present. A few years ago, I was a different man, he began, his voice firm, but full of emotion. I believed that success was measured by what I could control, by what I could build with my own hands. But life has taught me an important lesson. True success lies in the connections we create and the impact we leave on people's lives. Victor shared his story with honesty and vulnerability, talking about the moments of doubt, the challenges, and the victories that led him to find his purpose. He highlighted the power of forgiveness, reconciliation, and listening as tools for personal and collective transformation. We all carry the ability to change the world around us, he concluded. No matter how distant or disconnected we feel, there is always a way back. And that path begins when we choose to listen, reconcile, and serve. The audience gave him a standing ovation. But what touched Victor the most were the conversations that followed. Many people have come forward to share their own stories of struggle and transformation, thanking her for being an inspiration. After the forum, Carlos organized a small ceremony to honor Victor for his contributions. He received a commemorative plaque, but the real gift came from Carlos' words. "Victor, you are living proof that it is never too late to change." His work is leaving a legacy that will continue to inspire generations. Victor accepted the tribute with humility. For him, recognition was not the final goal, but a confirmation that he was on the right track. Back at his house, Victor sat on his porch, looking up at the starry sky. He felt the presence of the voice again, now more serene than ever. There was no more urgency, just a comforting whisper. "You have fulfilled your mission, Victor. And now your light will continue to shine through those you touched." Victor smiled, feeling a peace that transcended any other experience. He knew that even though his personal journey was reaching a point of maturity, his impact would continue to grow. Victor spent the next few years consolidating the projects he had started. The Comunidades Conectado program has grown exponentially, training new leaders and social entrepreneurs. The global partnerships he established brought innovations that transformed communities around the world. He continued to write, share his story, and mentor others. In every conversation, lecture, or initiative, Victor saw the multiplying power of his journey. People inspired by him were now inspiring others, creating a network of transformation that seemed endless. Atheist CEO mocks God publicly, but a mysterious voice leads him to redemption one evening. While having dinner with Clara and Daniel, Victor reflected on the legacy he was building. His children, now adults and independent, were also treading paths of impact in their respective areas. "Dad, you've always told us that purpose is something we choose every day," Daniel said. "And today, I see it clearly in everything we do." Victor smiled, proud of his children and what they had become. After dinner, Victor walked to his balcony for the last time that night. He looked up at the stars and silently gave thanks for all he had experienced. The journey never ended, but he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The light you turned on will never go out. With a last breath of gratitude, Victor walked into his home, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. And you, are you ready to reconcile with the past? Sometimes the answer is closer than we think. And you? Are you ready to reconcile with the past? Sometimes the answers we seek are closer than we imagine. I want to hear your story.